Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to be walking through the grieving process, drawing from the powerful, real-world teachings of Ronnie Kaufman. This is essentially Class 6 of 12 from his Exploring Beyond Divorce course. And look, if this is a journey you're on right now, just understanding the landscape, well, that can be incredibly empowering.
You know, grief, it's just this strong, sometimes totally overwhelming emotion. And if you're feeling that way, the first thing I want you to know is that it's completely valid. This journey isn't about fixing something that's broken. It's about learning to navigate a profound and very human experience. So, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll get a handle on what grief really is. Then, we'll walk through a 5-phase guide and think of it less like rigid steps and more like a map to help you see where you are. We'll explore denial and anger, then move into bargaining and depression, and finally, we'll land on what Ronnie calls the gift of acceptance.
Okay, let's dive right in. Before we can even begin to navigate this journey, we have to understand the terrain. So, what do we actually mean when we talk about grief, especially after a relationship ends?
Here's the most important thing to get right off the bat. Grief isn't some kind of disorder or a sign of weakness. It is the natural, expected, and honestly healthy reaction to losing something as huge as a marriage or a long-term partnership. And this is what's so interesting, right? There's this kind of paradox. Grief is this universal human experience. It connects all of us. But your journey through it, the way it feels, the way it unfolds, that is completely and totally unique to you. No two paths are ever the same. And this right here is a huge shift in mindset. You can't control the emotional waves. They're going to come. But by understanding them, you can learn how to navigate them. It's not about fighting the current. It's about preparing yourself for the ride. Okay, so now let's explore a framework that so many people have found really helpful. The 5 phases of grief. Again, think of this as a map that can help you locate yourself in what can feel like a really confusing emotional landscape. So we're going to look at this model of 5 distinct phases. But this isn't a race with a finish line, not at all. It's just a framework to help you make sense of what can feel like a totally chaotic and confusing time.
Now, before we detail these phases, this is absolutely critical to remember. This is not a neat step-by-step checklist. You'll probably bounce between these phases, maybe revisit old ones, and you're going to experience them with totally different levels of intensity. They are just guides for your journey.
All right, let's start with the first 2 phases that people often run into first. You can think of these as those initial, powerful waves that hit you right after the shock of a separation.
The first reaction for a lot of people is denial. It's that feeling of shock and disbelief. You might find yourself thinking, no way, this can't really be happening. It's just your mind's way of processing these overwhelming emotions at its own pace.
And look, denial isn't about being dishonest with yourself. It's actually an incredibly powerful defense mechanism. Your mind literally creates a buffer, a temporary shield, just to absorb that initial shock and help you survive that first intense wave of pain. So what happens when that initial numbness from denial starts to wear off? Well, the pain underneath starts to resurface. But it doesn't always feel like sadness. A lot of the time, it gets redirected and comes out as anger. And this anger can be pointed literally anywhere, at things, at strangers on the street, even at your friends and family. But more often than not, it's aimed squarely at your former partner. And that can create this vicious cycle, where you feel guilty for being so angry, which just ends up fueling even more anger. All right, let's move on to the next 2 phases. After that initial shock and anger, the journey often turns inward. This leads to a search for control and, eventually, a need to face the deep sadness of the loss itself.
Bargaining. You know, this really comes from a place of feeling completely helpless. It's this desperate need to get some control back. You find yourself getting lost in all those if-only statements. If only I had been a better partner, if only we had just tried one more thing. It can even get to the point where you're making these secret deals with a higher power, just trying to undo what's already happened.
So, when the bargaining doesn't work and the reality of the situation really sinks in, the sheer weight of it all can lead to depression. But it's really important to understand that this can show up in 2 very different ways.
Yep, it's so important to see that there are really 2 different kinds of depression here. The first one is practical. It's full of all the worries about money and dividing up your stuff and co-parenting schedules. The second type, though, is a quieter, much more private depression. This is the heavy internal work of getting ready to let go. And it's not eased by solutions, but by compassion, a kind word, or sometimes just a simple hug. And that brings us to the final phase on our map. Now, this isn't about forgetting or being over it. It's about reaching a place of peace with what happened. It's the path forward.
You know, reaching acceptance is called a gift for a reason, because not everyone gets there. It's a time that's marked not by some crazy happiness, but by a quiet, steady sense of calm. And let's be super clear, acceptance is not happiness. It's calm. It's that moment you finally stop resisting reality and stop fighting the past. This is where you can finally make peace. And in that peace, you create space for new possibilities. The best thing you can do for yourself is to just allow yourself to feel the grief when it shows up, because trying to fight it only makes the pain last longer. And that's the real takeaway here. Acceptance isn't just the end of the story. Like the quote says, it's the doorway. It's the door out of an ending and into a brand new beginning. It's the start of your next chapter.
So we'll end with a question, just for you. As you think about your own journey, what has been the most difficult phase for you so far, and why? Taking a moment to understand where you are, well, that's the most powerful tool you have for healing. Thanks for joining me.